Welcome back to our study in the book of Colossians. In our last session, we kind of went backwards a little bit and re-examined that phrase about the resurrection, where it says that Christ is the firstborn from the dead. We did that in preparation for where we're going to go today in verse 19 of chapter 1. For it was the Father's good pleasure for all the fullness to dwell in him, in Jesus Christ, and through him to reconcile all things to himself, whether things on earth or things in heaven, having made peace through the blood of his cross. Wow, this is big stuff. Jesus brings it all together, and Jesus makes everything worthwhile. That's why it is so important that we understand our faith is only found in God through Jesus Christ and his atoning work and his resurrection. When we put that all together, we see where it says that God put the fullness of himself in Jesus. It was for God's pleasure, for God's fulfillment, that he brings Jesus into the picture. And Jesus then reconciles everything that ever was to God. So it's with things on earth, things in heaven. So it's not just physical, it's spiritual. And then he talks about that issue of that brings us into peace. Okay, and it's just not personal peace and like, oh, I feel great. It's peace with God. We are no longer struggling and fighting against God, because that's our nature as sinful, fallen creatures. What we find is we can have genuine peace with God through Christ. But he brings it even more into the better understanding because he articulates it as the blood of his cross. Because he paid the price for our sins by the shedding of his blood on the cross, we can have peace with God. We don't have to worry about, is God going to get me? Is God going to condemn me? Is God going to cast me into eternal hell? And if we don't accept Jesus Christ, those are the ultimate ends of our lives. But when we accept Christ and his sacrificial giving of himself and the shedding of his blood on the cross, and then realizing that he was raised from the dead to give us hope, when we accept that, we can, should, and will have peace with God. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to be a rosy walk all the time here on earth as Christians, because we're going to trip and stumble. That's the nature of our fallen being. But we can continually be forgiven. It doesn't give us a license to sin, but it does give us forgiveness of our sins when we do sin. And it's through his blood. It's not through mine. It's not through yours. It's not through any other process of works. It's only by believing what he did for us as individuals. And then that gives us the wide open door, the pathway to have peace with God. This is amazing stuff theologically, and it's also very practical, and in a great way we can apply this every moment of every day in our lives if we're willing to. And that's the beauty of this particular text. It is so rich in application for how we live for Jesus Christ each day. We'll pick up there in our next session.